This week on NUevo Gumbo.
Did Whitney leave the church, or did the
church leave Whitney?
leave Whitney? Right.
Here we are talking about jazz and in the context of church.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you were a professional performing musician.
Yep.
And then you went into the church.
Yeah.
And founded a congregation and so forth and so on. Now, that's quite a move in this world where people see things in this segmented, bifurcated world. I'd like to hear more of that story, because as I told you before, we had a deacon in Bethany who performed in the clubs in Newark. And when he became a deacon, he felt he had to put his horn away.
Right.
And Carrie Smith, who you will certainly know, the great blues singer.
Absolutely.
I performed her eulogy, and there were so many people present in the sanctuary that day who either hadn't been to church lately or who had never been to church. And in the course of the eulogy, I said that Carrie was loved by the Lord, not despite the fact that she sang the blues, but because she sang the blues.
Yeah.
And at the repast, there were people coming to me to talk about that line, which it came naturally to me. I didn't think I was saying anything that special, but they had tears in their eyes.
Yeah.
Because they wanted some affirmation that they weren't dancing with the devil.
Right.
Tell me,
I mean, a couple of good things you brought up, I will say. First of all, when you're talking about the dancing and not too much dancing, the difference between the dancing on Saturday night and Sunday morning, Wyatt T. Walker says that the only difference between the dance on Sunday and the dance on Saturday night is that on Sunday, they go side to side. On Saturday, they go side to side. On Sunday, they go up and down.
Yeah.
So it's the same rhythm and it's the same beat.
I think he was a very close friend of mine.
Yeah.
He was my senior, but we were very good friends. We traveled together in South Africa and in Syria. So I know how Wyatt, his love for music, of course, is legendary. And that's an interesting notion. Side to side, up and down.
Yeah. But, no one, when I got a call to ministry, I had come off the road. I was with a very well-known big band, and I had gotten tired of the road, had my horn stolen a couple times from bandmates, if you will, that had some addiction issues. And I felt it was time for me to come off the road and come home. And I was in California at the time. I was doing a lot of studio work as a studio musician, trying to survive. And I had always been in the church. I grew up in the church. I was a member of the church that my family founded, Mount Pisgah AME Church. Very small church. On a good Sunday, we could probably fit 35 people. But the music was good. The preaching was powerful. I was inspired, and it never left me. But there was something in me. The church never said this. The church never said it directly. But when I received the call to ministry out of some life-changing circumstances, although I had always been a professional musician and had played in the church. I mean, when my grandmother brought me that saxophone, that clarinet, I played Amazing Grace in the church, and people clapped.
Yes,
because I was taking my horn and I was playing music that was considered traditional Christian music.
Exactly.
I was playing a hymn. I was playing a recognized melody. Well, when my chops grew and I learned about harmony and theory and jazz improvisation, and I felt that music was a little bit more complex and fed me differently, that's the area and avenue I went down. Um, no one ever said when I was licensed or ordained that I had to stop playing,
Right.
but 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 there was something in me, Bill, that said that music would not be an acceptable extension of who you are now that you are, if you will, an ordained member of the clergy. So while the church never said we don't want no jazz up in here,
There
uh,
was
there,
something. There was
there was
something
something inside of
implicit.
me. There was something inside of me that said, if I got out my horn and played "Come Sunday," or played um, in a sentimental mood. I mean,
Right. 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 Right.
there's
Right.
some wonderful tunes in the jazz repertoire, that, because it would not be recognized as something, quote unquote, that would be seen as holy, right? That somehow that needed to take my music and my horn playing needed to take a secondary role. That
Hmm.
would not, and that I would not be seen as a serious member of the clergy.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
no one ever said that to me. No
But
one ever
it was
said that to me.
implicit. I mean, I get it how that feeling may have welled up in you because
Right.
the look. I mean, look. We are very good at declaring on the one hand that God is sovereign, and
Mm,
on the other hand, deciding what God can do.
right.
You see,
Right.
and
Right.
I think that that's a perfect example.
Right. So I can remember. I can remember playing. I was invited to play it was in a church, it was at a Baptist church, and I was invited to play during one of their special services. And I don't remember the tune that I played. I mean, it was a fairly traditional Christian hymn. If it wasn't Amazing Grace, it was something like that.
Yes.
But now I'm no longer 9 years old playing it. Now I am, 20 something years old playing it, have got my chops up, and I played it as Greg Edwards.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I can remember the clergy on the pulpit. I could feel their eyes on the back of my head, like
Uh-oh.
like we done heard enough. We done heard enough.
Oh, yes.
Right, you know. So I mean, so literally, the person that was emceeing the service stood up as if to say, "You're taking us to a place that we might not be able to come back from."
Right,
Like,
right.
he never said that, but it
No,
was all.
actually, what he was saying is this is sounding too good. It scares me.
I remember, in that moment in the church feeling embarrassed
Mhm.
and feeling that I was chastised because I was taking them to the club,
Yes,
and
yes,
that's
yes.
not what we do in church. We don't
Right.
take them to the club at church.
Yeah.
We take them.
We go to the club, but that's on Saturday.
But I remember feeling like, oh, I crossed the line.
Yes.
I crossed. Now, once again, everybody came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, you played beautifully," and
Yes, yes.
but it was, I don't know, maybe it was reminiscent of a day gone by. It was getting too
No,
good.
no, no, no. It was reminiscent of last night.
Right.
And look, this is why we are gathered in this
Yeah.
medium to
Yeah.
talk,
Yeah.
because the false dichotomies that have emerged in the church have allowed people to be hypocrites, to behave. Well, look, here's an example. In the church, I could hear sometimes people would get into very tough arguments over, very small matters. And I remember one day a woman saying to another, "You better be glad I'm in the church." And by the way, I had a sermon about that. It impressed me so much. So what was she saying?
Yeah.
I'm one person in the church,
Yeah.
but oh, you get me in that parking lot and I'll be
Right.
all over you. See?
Right. Right.
In other words, we have to stop this. We have
Right.
to stop separating our lives. And I often said, my goal is to help you become the same person in church as you are on your job
Right.
or when you're out, So we have to teach people how to go to the club and behave with the same kind of moral and ethical behavior as
Right.
they would allegedly exhibit in the sanctuary. So I think you were bringing people close to the line that reminded them of their other life,
Right.
not life they had given up, but the life that they still lived but hid from
Right.
the church.
Right. Well,
And the jokes about different religious denominations and traditions, like they say, the Methodist, what is it? The Methodists never drink
Oh yeah.
in public. You see, I mean,
Right.
God bless the Methodists.
Right.
I'm picking on them.
Right. They say,
So, yeah,
but it reminds me, Duke Ellington, very, very, this is true, towards the latter part of his life, wrote these incredible, almost operatic um, series of compositions
yes.
of sacred music,
Oh no, listen,
and
listen.
and
Let,
most
let me let me
most
tell you.
churches,
Let me tell you
most
this.
churches did not want to. Most of the traditional churches that he went to, and I would say the African American churches at that time. Um, Now these were sacred works of art. These were where Black and Tan Fantasy came out of, and Come Sunday, and all of these great compositions that the majority of the churches that he tried to solicit participation and cooperation from said this was not music worthy of God.
Yes. Well, this is the Thomas Dorsey experience, because he certainly moved easily between jazz and what became gospel. But Jerry Allen, by the way, performed one of these compositions you're referring to. I can't recall the name of the one specifically, but she performed it with the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra.
Mm.
And it's a glorious experience. But the one that you'll remember is Mary Lou's Mass. Mary Lou Williams,
Yeah,
a
Mary Lou Williams.
very devout Catholic woman, also well regarded as a jazz pianist composer, and she's in that famous picture, A Day in Harlem.
Yes.
That we all have displayed.
Yeah.
But Mary Lou Williams, out of her Christian faith, composed an entire jazz mass.
Mm-hmm.
And it was ultimately performed at the Vatican. So we've had artists who've been trying to tell us there is a connection, but traditionalists have resisted this. And I remember that Jerry Allen, on the 100th anniversary of the composition of the Jazz Mass with Carmen Lundy, the Howard University Jazz Ensemble,
Mm-hmm.
Dwight Andrews, whom you know, and various other great musicians came together and performed on the centennial anniversary of this composition, Mary Lou's Mass, in the choir loft at Bethany. And that was some kind of a breakthrough for some of the folk who had been not opponents of the jazz vespers at the church, but they were a bit cool toward it. And they were so drawn in by the spiritual dimension of this work that they embraced the Vespers, going forward. So
Right.
I think we, in the course of our conversations, ought to highlight some of the things, not just the overtly religious, intentionally religious things like Dear Lord by Coltrane,
Sure.
or as you referred, Come Sunday by Duke Ellington, but a single petal of a rose, for
Yes.
example,
My
which
goodness.
is not theological in nature,
Right. Right.
But my Lord, I mean, if you're not moved in the best places of your being by the performance of that tune, you might as well be dead.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm reminded of you know that when we think about some of the most well-known black popular singers, um, Aretha Franklin,
Yes.
Whitney Houston,
Sam Cooke, don't forget him.
Sam Cooke, Northstone's Sarah Vaughan, that all of these folk came out the church. That they came out of, not all of them, but many of them that have national acclaim, Grammy award winning artists. That
Yes.
they got their start in the choir log, and this really, what we're talking about really struck me several years ago. It really struck me, and it struck me in a way that is to still kind of haunts me, is when I was watching Whitney Houston's funeral, and the fact that they brought her remains back into that Baptist church, and and there was such conversation about, did Whitney leave the church, or did the
Or did
church
the church leave
leave
Whitney?
Whitney? Right, right, right. But I remember the fact that here is this little girl in pigtails.
Yes.
And undeniably, and I'm going to be very subjective uh, as a black preacher and say that the best voices, some of the best voices, jazz, popular, R&B, some of the best musicians, jazz, popular, R&B, or otherwise, have come out of the church. And there's something about that environment that helps to ignite the soul. And yet the church often has not done a good job, I won't say at holding on to, but helping people be whole in their gift of creativity and execution of skill and musical talent.
Yeah.
So I remember seeing her body. I remember seeing that casket. I remember and saying, there's something very profound that she had a desire, her family had a desire. And I remember even the commentary saying, oh, she came back to church. She
Mm-hmm.
came back to church, and probably longing in her soul that it wasn't so much that she had left the church as much as the church perhaps did not accept her gift because of how she was categorized or seen.
Next week on NUevo Gumbo.
He said, Pastor, is that what you mean by jazz vespers? I said, yes, sir. He said, we should definitely get one of them.